Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis Show. We're a father-son podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And today we're going to get into the big problem of finances. We're not going to solve your finance problems, although I shouldn't say that because Brett may have a bag of tricks because we're joined today by Brett Barlow. Brett, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm really doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Brett, as the CEO of Everee, is changing the way that we get our money. And actually, your Everee, you say the way you get paid. And here,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
was just gonna. I know you're ready to answer the question I'm about to ask because I'm old school. You know, the Army said, you get a choice. You get paid twice a month, or you get paid once a month,
Sure.
and then everybody else does the same thing. So why is this different? What is Every going to solve for us?
Yeah. So, throughout my career, I've really focused on and found enjoyment in disrupting things. We could talk if you want a little bit later about some of my professional history, but it's been in industries where it's an established industry, but it's just kind of stagnant, hasn't quite made innovations, and there's a need in the marketplace. So, about 6 years ago, my co-founder partner Ron Ross had this situation where his daughter was going to college. She was working, making enough money to pay her rent, but she kept coming to dad for the short-term loans to get her from. It was just kind of a mismatch in timing. She'd be paid in a time that was incongruent with when her bills were due, and he was like, "This is." I'm happy to help you, but this feels like an operational problem. This feels like something that could be addressed. And if it's just my daughter, she can't be the only one that's experiencing some of these challenges. So he set out to figure it out if there was a way, because he's a CFO, he's run payroll, or been in charge of payroll departments his entire career, and to see if he could fix the problem. So our mission is to pay workers the wages that they've earned as soon as they've earned them. So the way that we do that is we built a payroll platform. We were focused originally on hourly workers, think restaurants and kind of construction, things like that. And over the last 2 years, post-pandemic, where we've been pulled is into the gig economy. So creator economy, gig economy, contingent workforces, think delivery, but there's hundreds of different businesses out there. And right now there are, in the next 2 years, we expect that there will be nearly 90 million contingent workers in America, which is a lot. It's a lot of people, and the expectation they have, and the reason why they're in these contingent workforces is because the flexibility that it brings them, and the expectation is they're going to be paid when they've earned it. If you make a delivery or you take someone somewhere,
There's our PSA
I
reminder.
apologize for that, and I can turn
Notifications.
that off right now. I'm so sorry. That was unexpected. So we can
Don't worry about it. Just
cut that
roll
out.
with it, man. We roll with it here.
Yeah, there's going to be 90 million contingent workers in America. So what we've done is taken this payroll platform that we have, and we've created connection points with it where we can embed it into other people's platforms through white label, through API hooks, through fully embedded payroll, and we can pay people instantly. So what we do is we started on same day ACH, where we could, if your payroll is approved in the morning, we would pay you by 2 o'clock that afternoon. We've migrated even to faster payment, where it's instant pay within minutes. That we can pay people, and it's 365 days a year, weekends, holidays, all of those things. So if you're making a delivery on Christmas Eve, you can be paid on Christmas Eve. So we're focused on speed. Our mission is to put the value of the money back in the workers' hands, because in traditional payroll, the traditional payroll has really been failing American workers. for example, 68% of Americans American workers are living paycheck to paycheck. So if you're an employer, essentially 7 out of 10 of your workers are in one way or another distressed, worried, preoccupied with the way that or the money in their account. And so that lessens productivity. And put on top of that, over 12 million Americans utilize payday loans with an average APR of 390%.
Yeah.
So, these things there's these industries that are in one way or another taking advantage of people that I would consider to be vulnerable to this. Mm-hmm. They're profiting from it. And we want to break that. We don't want to keep people's money. We don't hold on to it. We push it immediately through. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And we're really excited about it.
I want to test my memory on this a little bit because I think it would have been, somewhere around ballpark 6-8 years ago. I remember hearing a episode of the Freakonomics podcast that talked about this exact same problem. And one of the things they were talking about, if I remember right, is that it was basically you had a system that was built so long ago and never updated with any modern technology. It was still observing banking holidays.
Yeah.
They only do paychecks every 2 weeks because it would cost too much money to print every day and those type of things. Could you expand a little bit more on that?
Well, that's true. It was started essentially because people taking kind of garnishments and taxes out of paychecks was relatively complicated, and we just kind of landed on a 2-week, bi-weekly, semi-monthly pay cycle. In 2018, the Fed approved same-day ACH, and it was at an affordable rate where that kind of gave us the engine to be able to move this forward. So those institutions that you're talking about are not incentivized to move quickly. And I'll give you an example. There are some, I don't know if I need to call out specific payroll companies here, but we'll just say
it's okay. You can call them out.
You can call them out. ADP. People they know ADP, right? They're familiar with them. They're kind of the giant. There's other really large ones. If you looked at their public filings under their 10Q or 10K, there is a line item that says interest revenue or interest income. And basically what happens is if your pay is delivered on the 15th as a payday, the company has to provide the money to them by, say, the 12th or the 13th. And they're making hundreds of millions of dollars on the float in between those 2 days. So not only is it slow, but they're not incentivized to move quickly. That's a lot of money. It turns into hundreds of millions of dollars. 5 to 7% of their annual revenue comes from that situation. So yes, you're correct, and we set out to just shatter that. It's not fair. It's outdated. It's not necessary to do that. And the way people are working, we feel like we're starting kind of a new generation of entrepreneurs, because these gig economy workers are essentially, in their way, an owner of their own business, which gives them kind of ideas to operate where they don't have to be in a 9-to-5 job and they can think of other things. So I think that we're going to see a tremendous output of businesses that come from people that are starting in this gig economy, and they're their own bosses, and what kind of ideas come from that. So to me, it's really exciting. But the traditional payroll systems just aren't built to accommodate that.
Yeah, you're spot on the holding of money, because I dropped a payroll company a few months back because they were doing the 3-day thing, and then all of a sudden they were pulling it out a week ahead of payroll. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dude, I mean, it's bad enough that you got to pull it 3 days prior to make sure that all my money is there to run payroll. And yeah, I was like, you ain't making that much money on me.
Right. And that takes your cash flow and it disrupts the way you're trying to operate your business. So one of the unique product features that we have is we call it Everee Credit, where our customers can go on our credit facility and we'll pay their payroll for them every single day or instantly, and then they settle up with us on their 2-week regular payroll cycle. So nothing changes for them, but we make the payments for them, and so they don't have to worry about QuickBooks, inputs or anything. Like, we take care of the taxes, we take care of all of that. And then they can take those dollars that they were going to use for payroll for those 2 weeks and deploy that capital in a way that can help them grow the business. And it's predictable for them. They just know they have to pay us back every 2 weeks or 30 days, whatever we work out with them. And it's on our dime at first, and then they pay us back.
So you're assuming a lot of risk there. How are you mitigating that risk?
Well, there's credit checks. We definitely have to know. It's the KYC, know your customer, and we do background on people as far as their financial viability, bank statements, things like that, credit history, and not everybody gets approved for it, certainly, but we have a lot of companies that are using them, and we have 2 checks. One, my current CFO, who manages our credit program, used to be a bank auditor. So he does the first pass. And then he hands it over to our banking partner, and they do another pass. And we rate them. And but all this can happen within 24 hours. It feels like a big process, but it's really quite fast.
One of the things when you talk about like disrupting an industry that I always find really interesting is that whenever there's dead space and lost money or whatever it might look like, and I can define it a little bit more in a second, it's always interesting to see how people reuse that, whether it's passing along the savings to the customers or using that in a smarter way inside of their business. Have you looked at anything with the interest that you were talking about with that? For example, if this is a great idea, we can cut this out and you can save it, so nobody's stealing your ideas out here. But could you, for example, take that paid interest that other people are using for their own gain and say, hey, Brett, if I pay you every 2 weeks, I'll pay you the interest that normally these other banks would have been making money off of, or giving savings to your clients? Or is there a way that you've been able to approach that?
Yeah, so the money's not free. We charge a fee to be able to do that. So, we definitely do that, but it's nominal in my opinion, and it would certainly be less than what another company is gaining by holding on to their money. So there are things that we've seen where people are using our product as a revenue generator for themselves. So for example, if you're a vertical SaaS platform, say a CRM for a landscaping business, and you handle time and scheduling and maybe some billing functionality, you can white label with us and we can embed within your product, and then you can mark that up. And we've seen people using our product as an additional revenue stream for themselves as well. So where we see a lot of the benefit is in retention. So there's a lot of talk about hiring, quiet quitting. You hear people out there kind of those terms. They're dissatisfied. They don't feel valued, or they don't feel like they're compensated. And it's hard to find people, which is interesting because I think there's a lot of people out there that are willing and able to work, but they have choice. They have much more choice. They have more options now than they have in the past. And what we've seen is a 25 to 30% increase in retention for businesses that paid their workers faster. In a recent job delivery driver survey we did, 80% of the drivers said that fast pay was a deciding factor on where they decided to work.
I find that really fascinating. I guess this is just goes back to the whole change of attitude about it, because like I said, for as long as I think even when I was sacking groceries as a kid, I only got paid at most once a week. However, now that I've said that, when I was mowing lawns, when I finished mowing the lawn, I threw the lawnmower up in the truck, and I went and knocked on Mrs. Smith's door, and she handed me a check right then.
Right.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that makes you as a kid say, oh, let me go mow that next lawn because I know I'm going to get paid. So we work with people to pay their sales reps commissions faster. It's not just salary, but something that is unique about our business is we can handle 1099s and W-2s. So some companies focus on one or the other, but because we started as a payroll company, we're able to do both. And I love what you just shared. I have a very similar memory from my childhood of being paid after the work is done. And it feels good. You've got something in your pocket. Otherwise, you're giving that interest-free labor loan to your employer, and they're not paying you for 2 weeks while you're working. That's just not, it's not necessary.
I think
Now, there's a certain group of people, higher wage earners might not be as interested in the product. They're not living paycheck to paycheck. So yeah, it may not resonate with everyone. But as I mentioned with a couple of numbers I've shared, there's a large kind of swath of the working population in the United States that it can be incredibly meaningful for.
I think there's a really interesting thing as you think about the employees and getting paid on that regular basis rather than waiting the entire month or the 2 weeks, which is the reason that a lot of people fall into those payday loans, those type of things, is because they're off on one cycle. Like, how many people do you talk to that are paycheck to paycheck, and it's basically like, hey, this 1 week that I'm off, if I could just fix that 1 week, not spend any money for 1 week, then I would be back on the cycle, everything would be fine. And the thing is, when you're getting paid once a month, or even every 2 weeks to a lesser extent, when you talk about like your personal economics and controlling your household and all your budgeting and all of that, you're jumping to the hardest level right off the bat. If your first job, you're waiting for a month for that paycheck, budgeting that out is going to be the hardest part rather than getting consistent flow. And you can, make that budgeting process a little bit easier. And I think that's probably a huge piece, especially for younger workers, but even for everybody, it just makes the math so much simpler.
Yeah, you know what? And I think it also gives a value to the money that you're earning. So as an example, if you're being paid every single day, so say you make, just round figures, you make $100 a day. So $500 in a work week, right? On Friday, you decide you want to go buy a big screen TV. And the big screen TV is $500. Is the thought goes into your head, and this has been told me several times, the thought goes in your head like, okay, well, is that television worth, I worked really hard this week. Is it worth, rather than $500, is it worth Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? And it creates a deeper maybe appreciation because it's tangible and it's fast, where people are maybe rethinking or saying, yeah, maybe not right now. Maybe I'll save some more till I have that cushion, or maybe it is, but the purchase is a more considered purchase. And I think companies, the pushback I've heard about this is companies have said, well, if we pay our employees every day, they won't have any money for rent, and they'll just spend it, and they'll come to us, for loans or something like that. I think that is so disrespectful.
Yeah.
I think that for a company to take on themselves the role of financial advisor to an employee or a savings account, like a paycheck is a savings account, that just feels wrong to me. I mean, we need to be giving people the benefit of, they don't want to be rolling around in debt over and over and over. And I think most people will manage there's some people that just will struggle with it their entire lives. I'm not saying that our product is a silver bullet, but I think most people want to be financially stable. They want predictability in their life, and they want to have control over the dollars that they've earned as quickly as possible.
Well, it's an interesting psychological thing because here's where, I'm going back to, and in my early soldier days of, payday activities. And I mean, we would quite literally, this happened, they stopped doing this right before I enlisted in the Army. But I mean, payday activities used to be, you stood in line and got the cash for the month. I mean, think about that, for the month. And what did a lot of soldiers do is like, woohoo, I won the lottery. And they were out that night at the strip club. They were at the bar buying drinks. They'd spend it all.
Yeah.
Because in the good way the Army operates, they still had a roof over their head, and they still had the mess hall to eat in. But now they had all this cash. And it just leaves me. It also reminds me of the guys that were working on the North Slope in Alaska, and they'd come down on their paydays. And yeah, you wanted to be in the bar then, and you wanted to be a friend. I just say that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying. There's
Yeah.
some people that aren't going to be able to plan ahead, and it's not kind of in their DNA. But those, in my opinion, are kind of edge cases or outliers. The traditional, or not, nothing about this is traditional, but I think the majority of these workers feel in one way or another kind of taken advantage of, and they wanted to have control of their finances put back in their hands.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head, though, when you use the the story of the $100 a day. I've gotten paid Monday when each day of the week, put $100 in my bank account. Now it's Friday, and I see the sale at Best Buy for the $500 TV, and I'm like, yeah, it's a lot different than I've got $500 in my hand walking out. That's like burning a hole in our pocket. You remember that? That old phrase, I got all this money burning a hole in my pocket. I got to go spend it. So I think there's something to be said for that psychological change of it. And here's today's, here's tomorrow's. I think there's more to be said for that in the psychological change to saving the dollar.
Yeah.
And how you can save the dollar going forward, because you're earning it daily. And I think there's a bigger change in the attitude as opposed to the, it's payday, let's go spend the money.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a kind of a psychological change for the administrators of payroll too. What, are you crazy? I'm not going to process payroll every single day. That's way too hard. But our product is app based. We can process, payroll in our company payroll in 90 seconds. Basically, when wages have been approved, you get a message on your phone, you swipe left and approve it, and you're off to the races. Excuse me.
I think just to kind of build on what we're saying there about the psychology, there's two really big effects that come to mind. Just the first being, you're talking about the money burning a hole in your pocket, the full wallet effect, if you want to call it that. It's the economist term is it's the marginal utility of a loss. When you have a lot of money, losing $5 doesn't hurt. When you have $100, losing $5 hurts a lot more, and that type of effect is what people use when they look at their account. It's kind of that whole when you count to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot. Like once I have over $100 in my account, it's a lot of money, and I'm gonna live like it's a lot of money until it gets down below 100, and then I'm gonna live in scarcity again. And that's why people wind up flipping back and forth on that. And I think to your point, Dad, when you get it every single day, you're removing that. But then I think the other piece, we talk about this in marketing all the time, half-life of excitement. I'm actually going to use a personal story of this. I got a sale in January. I remember it was I think January 2nd or 3rd, Dad, that I got a sale. I got commission at the end of the month. And I remember our payroll, thanks, Mom, reaches out and she says, hey, I sent in your commission, these kind of things. And I was like, oh, yeah, I got a sale. I wasn't excited about that. The day I got the sale, I was like, hey, I'm buying drinks. We're doing this. But as the life goes on, or as the half-life of the excitement goes on, you lose all of your excitement, right? Half-life has excitement has a half-life of 2 days. If you're waiting to get paid, then you're not going to be as connected to your work, and you're going to lose that kind of motivation that comes from the payment.
Sure. Yeah. Waiting for 30 days for a commission on something doesn't feel great. So again, back to kind of our credit that we do, or we pay people their commissions on the day that they close the deal, and it's essentially underwritten by the contract. Say you're a solar installer.
Right.
Well, when they close the deal and get the doc signed, we can pay them, and then it's underwritten by that contract, right? So when the contract gets paid or installed, then we get paid. But we get the sales rep so they can knock that next door, or they can make that next phone call. I agree exactly what you're saying there, Camden. I think it's I think it's important, and it's fair. It's the right way to go about it. Like just giving people the money they've earned. Like don't hold on to people's money. I don't like owing people money. Yeah. Period. Personal life, professional life. Like Like just keep it clean, get them the money as fast as they've earned it.
I want to point out something as
right.
we're talking about,
Go ahead, Cam.
Brett, you've been talking about, looking at industries and wanting to disrupt them. One thing that is so subtle, people might not catch this, but it is one of my favorite things to see people do when they talk about disrupting an industry or something needs to change, is you keep saying fairness, and it's about your fifth argument. Because if I go, oh, it's not fair, nobody cares. If I go in and I say, this is why it would work better, this is why it would work better, this is why it's wrong how it is, boom, boom, boom. And then I'm like, hey, also, dude, it's just more fair this way. That's an argument right there. That's how you disrupt an industry. If you just do an emotional sale, and anyone out there whose number one sale in their business is emotional sale, please clip this part of the podcast and go rework your sales. Because if you're just selling on emotions, people don't care. People don't respond to emotions because my emotions are different from yours. And so as soon as you get into the emotional side of things, people shut down. And so I just wanted to point that out because I think that's a huge lesson for a lot of people who get stuck on the emotional sale because it's the easiest one, but it's the hardest one to get somebody to buy.
Yeah, we started with our mission. I suppose you could say on emotional side, like this is just wrong and we can fix this. But then that quickly gets followed back with, and these are the stats that support it, and this is how our product solves it, and these are the results that we've seen. And, I agree with you. If it's all just kind of vaporware and kind of with emotion, that's not going to close the game,
So how did you mentioned your partner being former CFO and seeing the problem with his daughter. What did he sell you on? I mean, because you're a marketing guy, right?
Yeah. So through my career, 26 years, sales, marketing, some product, been in a lot of different startups. And the last two companies I was with, I was on the leadership team that took those companies public. And so I've been able to scale businesses from very little ARR to, $3-4 billion in market cap. But after the last company, I was feeling like, I've been doing marketing for a long time. I'm just going to kind of take a break. And when his name is Ron Ross, incredibly smart, good human being, came to me. I worked for a company called Skull Candy, which was the headphone brand, and I ran the marketing elements there, and he was the finance side of it. So we took that company public, and within a year of going public, we were the most shorted stock on NASDAQ. And if you think that doesn't create a pressure cooker within a boardroom, think again. So you see people under stress and how they work, and Ron and I always worked really well together. And so when he approached me, we had we'd been friends and stayed in contact. I started thinking to myself, he told me his story, and then I recalled earlier in my marriage where my wife and I were both working and having a conversation because our dishwasher broke at the same time that our alternator broke in our car.
Oh, shit.
And we're working, we're employed, we're doing, not living beyond our means and feel like we're trying to do things the right way, but we're stuck. And should I get we had a conversation. Should we get a payday loan? Should we get another credit card? Like, how are we going to get through this? And so his story really, I connected personally with it. Like, I understand what that's like, because if I could have just gone in and gotten access to wages I'd already earned, I wouldn't have to be considering these other things. So it's very personal for me. It's a lonely place as a father, as a husband, to feel like you're financially in a pickle, so to speak, and you can't provide for your family in a way. And it's, that's embarrassing. It's hard. It's frustrating. So that's what sold me, was the mission of it. The challenge of being a CEO, I'd never been a CEO before, so I'm absolutely learning on the job. And, I've gained a lot of empathy for the CEOs that I've worked with in the past.
You're like, now I know
why
you
did that. Yeah, there's, people don't have the full story, and being in the CEO chair can be, at times lonely. Buck stops here, so to speak. I've been very fortunate that I have an incredible executive team around me. They're very experienced. And so I don't have to be an expert at everything. And I think that's some advice I would give to other entrepreneurs of, you don't have to know everything, and actually acknowledging the fact that you don't know everything humanizes you and galvanizes the team around a mission. And it also empowers your team, your coworkers, to feel like their opinion matters because you're asking them. I'm not sure how to do that. What would you recommend? And it doesn't have to be. It's more, I would say, an optimistic way or an inclusive way to lead rather than leading through fear or threats or do this or you're going to be fired. It's more, hey, we can accomplish these awesome things. I feel like we have a gap in these two parts of our business. I'm not quite sure about that. So-and-so, could you tackle that? And so-and-so, could you tackle that? And then it feels like you've got some camaraderie and there's nothing better than winning together. I love that feeling.
Oh, all right, Cam. You could tell we were both doing that. All right, but I got one. My follow up for that, because I always love hearing different methodologies of how you as a CEO set the vision for the business. Mm-hmm. How do you come up with that? Because folks, if you don't know, that's one of the key elements to success for a CEO is setting the vision for the business and selling it to everybody in the team.
Yeah. Well, I think there's three primary things that a CEO is responsible for: mission, vision, values. If you don't have those three things, or if you have one but not the other, they play together. And so what we started out with first, and this was relatively simple, I guess, was the mission. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we stand for? And that was this problem that we were trying to solve of breaking the traditional 2-week pay cycle. So that's our mission, to pay people as fast as they earn money. Well, then the second part of that is, so how do you go about your daily work? And I think that's the values part of it. How do you treat each other? What do you stand for? What's important to you? And then, vision part of it, it should align with your mission, right? So if we have the objective to pay people faster than anybody else and unlock this kind of broken or archaic system, what are the things that we need to accomplish as a business to make that happen? So my part is trying to set a 2 to 3 year vision of where we're trying to be, and then empowering each of my executive team members to run their parts of the business to get us there, be it product, be it go-to-market functions, finance. So setting the vision, I think, is just really tightly aligned with what is your mission, right? So if you don't have a mission, your vision is going to be all over the place. And one of the most challenging things that we've come across as a startup is when you're early on, everything feels like an opportunity.
Shiny objects everywhere, right?
When you're trying to get your revenue up and to the right, you'll get a customer that'll say, hey, if you build these 1 or 2 things, we'll sign up. And it just spins you up like, oh, should we do this? And, it's not really on our roadmap, but should we go grab that? And so I think part of a CEO's responsibility is trying to keep the team aligned and focused on delivering what we've committed to and learning how to say no, even when it's hard, because it's hard to turn a paycheck away or an invoice away.
Talking about,
so let me hold on, Cam, now, because I gotta you talk about the big hand, and I appreciate that because that's educational. But what's your methodology? Do you do it once a year? Do you go up into the mountains? Mm-hmm. Do you go for a 5-mile run and then it comes to you? How do you see the vision? You don't have to share it, but how do you actually see the vision for what you're going to create?
Yeah, so we have 2 physical offsites a year where we go somewhere, and it might even just be that we're just out of our homes or our buildings. It's not even like a resort or something like that, but one, we get to a place where we're identifying what are the 3 to 5 things that we feel like we need to accomplish this year. And then out of that, we build tactical plans around it by group to ladder up into these objectives. So what we've done this now for 4 years, is we have what I call our executive playbook. And starting with the executive playbook, we have our mission, vision, values, but then we have our key objectives that we're trying to accomplish. And there's actually 6 to 8 of those. And then we have the metrics below them that we will measure and monitor all year long, so we can see, are we making progress on those things? And then we revisit those in our weekly exec meetings and kind of keep them top of mind. That's
awesome. Did you pull that out of my playbook that I wrote over here?
What's that?
Did you pull that out of my playbook that's written, that I wrote, that's sitting on my shelf?
Sure. Read your book, Otis. That's the Otis plan.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, not to make fun of it at all, because it is a great process, and I love hearing that, the way you rack and stack all those things to revisit and measure. And I would stomp my foot, but I don't know if you'd hear it. And plus, the office downstairs may not care for it. In the fact of you got to be measuring what you're doing. Yeah. So that's awesome that you.
Yeah, and you have to be willing and able to pivot, right? So something, if you're building your budget for the following year and you're building your sales model in October for next year, you have to know that you're going to learn new things by the time May rolls around that you didn't know in October. So if you hold on so tight to what you set 8 months ago or 6 months previous, I think that's a disservice too. So we start out with the playbook, but what I would also say is there needs to be an agile or a flexible approach to it to say, hey, we've learned some things and we're going to remodel, or we're going to look at it or reset some objectives to accommodate what we're learning in the business.
Speaking of the playbook there, I'm really interested to hear what your playbook is when we start talking about disruption. And I'd like to go after this into a little bit of story time of, some of the businesses that you've worked in there. But how do you approach an industry that is in need of that disruption? Because I think that there's so many out there, because just to get my point out on this, industries are built on top of previous iterations of industries. So every single industry has some sort of flaw, like what we talked about with the payroll. I mean, I've talked about it a bunch when we had Dr. Quello on, Dad, talking about agriculture and all these different things. Every old industry is due for some sort of disruption. So what's the Brett Barlow playbook to approach that?
Yeah. I don't want to create a new industry. Right? So the first step is, I don't want to have to, it's much harder if you have to explain to people what the industry is. Like creating, if you're familiar with Forrester and Gartner and like the magic the quadrants and things like that. I don't want to create a new one and say, oh, this is like, whatever it could be, it's a new thing. So one, find an existing industry that has a relatively large to very large TAM, or total addressable market, that hasn't been, really innovated in some time. So I'll give you an example. 15 years ago, I joined Skullcandy. For the previous 30 years, or whenever, headphones first became invented, or music players, they had been black headphones, Bose, Sony, like it's just what it was. Apple did a little bit of thing with their earbuds where they made them white. Not the most creative color in the world, but white, and that was different. We came in and we put a brand on the headphones. We put color to the headphones. We put influencers and athletes and made it cool, I guess you could say. We had to make sure that the product quality measured up with that, but it was an existing audience, people that appreciated sound and wanted it as part of their lives, and they wanted to individualize it. From there, I went to Pluralsight as the CMO. And Pluralsight, if you're not familiar with it, in the very simplest terms, is like Netflix for developers. Okay, so you pay your monthly subscription and you can go watch videos to learn how to code and measure your skills. So have there been training in colleges and schools around for years, decades, generations? Yes, absolutely. But had they been in the cloud? Had they been accessible for your own laptop or desktop? And no, they hadn't up to that point. So that's what we did there. And learning is a $150 billion addressable market. Then it comes over into Everee. Well, think about a large total addressable market. Every company in the world needs to pay their employees. I don't know if there's a larger addressable market there. But people have been doing it the exact same for 50, 70 years. It just hasn't changed. So everybody knows what it is. It's a huge kind of just marketplace, and it really hasn't been innovated in for quite some time, forever. It's just kind of been the same. So those are three examples of how I've picked and looked at businesses. Also the size of the business when I come in. I don't really want to join a business that's fully mature. It's more like a couple $1 million in revenue, and then I want to grow it and scale it. But that's how I've thought about it, and that's my kind of a couple things, boxes that I check before I join a business.
I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are about the longevity of the disruptions. And I think, in the perfect world, you start, to take Everee as the example, and you grow that market share, more and more businesses are using Everee, and it goes and it goes and goes. Then there's this other story that I think a lot of people have in their mind, which, and I'll just use Everee as the example again, which is it goes great for another 2 years or so, and then PayPal comes in and pulls the rug out from underneath you type thing, whether it's a purchase of Everee or whatever it is, where you kind of lose your baby to that extent. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that, or do you think that's just a kind of a failure of thinking where you shouldn't be looking at it like that?
I think impersonation is the greatest form of flattery. That's why one of the reasons why I choose markets that have very large addressable markets. So there's room for more than one unicorn, so to speak. And if it is a strategic acquisition or something like that, that's a good outcome for our employees who are all shareholders. Yeah. So the innovation part of it, I think we need to continually be doing that and thinking, we call it our ICP, ideal customer profile. When we're going after something like that right now, we're solving a payroll or payments pain point for them. But that singular person deals with more than one problem, right? They deal with expense reports, or they deal with budgeting. Like there's a lot of different things that we can do that continually to provide value, and what I would say is create a moat around our business that allows us to be an essential tool for these buyers. Ultimately we have investors. At some point they want to see a return on their investment, and I'm about that. I grow businesses. I want our investors to trust us to make their money back, and I would love to have outcomes for our employees. But I certainly wouldn't just sell or even consider something like that if I didn't feel like it was a good home for the people that work for us.
What's next? I mean, if technology is allowing us to this point now to do a daily pay cycle, what's the next innovation that you kind of like? Maybe it's written up on the whiteboard, or last time y'all did an offsite, you said, "What if?"
Yeah, we have what if conversations. One, I think payroll has traditionally been you're buying a platform, an ADP or Paylocity or something like platform. You go to their platform and you conduct your business. Where I feel like the world is moving is more technically embedded into other people's platforms. and servicing their customer base where they are and not making them come to you. So white labeling our product for other vertical SaaS, embedding our product for them, and providing various methods for which they can be paid. So we could pay onto a credit card or a debit card that's in your wallet. You could sign up for the Everee debit card, and that costs nothing to you. It's free. Or we can just put it right into your bank account. So I think the optionality and continually trying to provide flexibility and choice to the worker that has been just missing for so long, that's really where we want to be focused. And I think our greatest opportunity is to be able to meet people where they are, instead of saying, drop everything that you're doing, come over here. Embedding and working with them in their arena is where I think a lot of innovation will come. And there's additional fast payment options as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. It always flashes me back to, my time in the Army when big Army, somebody decided we should have this. And they would come down and give us this new shiny piece of kit. And then we had to figure out how to use that thing.
Right.
And instead of the other way around, how come you can't make something that makes what I do better, rather than me changing the way I do everything? That's a critical aspect to success. To success.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying that. That's what we believe. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for me, thinking about there was so much, and I'll be honest. When I see fintech, I always get a little nervous, and I'm like, is this going to be one of those ones where one of those shows where we go all super tech, and I'll just be doing a lot of nodding my head? But I think there was a great balance of that today, which really helped me understand something I never thought of in this way, was the interest-free labor loan. Mm-hmm. There's so much truth to that. In that aspect, because of what you're doing, right? You're putting in the work. Don't get any ideas, Camden.
Yeah.
You're putting in the work every day, and then eventually, you're reimbursed for all that work that you've done. Mm-hmm. And thinking back, and thank you for reminding me of my summer days of mowing lawns. I'm done. I get the paycheck.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
So,
feels
Camden,
very.
how about you? What you learn? Oh, I'm sorry, Brett.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. Camden, what'd you learn?
I have usually we leave this type of sappier one to the guests, but I have a little bit of the sappy one today, which is I just feel good about the solving of these different problems. Like I said, this is something I remember listening to the Freakonomics podcast in college and going, gosh, somebody should fix that. And I probably wrote an idea in my notebook and said, oh, I'll do this one day. And, 6 years later, I haven't done anything to do with it. But I think that's one of those things, like as an entrepreneur, you get pulled with all these different ideas. And it's always good to see other people going out and solving those problems. And it's like, hey, if I go solve one and you go solve one and you go solve one, it's like, okay, then things will keep getting better. So that's it for me today. That's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you from my part, I've thought many times about what would be next for me if I were to leave Everee, which I don't have plans of doing. One of the things.
Hear that, folks? Wait. Make sure everybody heard that.
Not going anywhere.
All right.
But, future thinking, I have 3 children. 2 of them are in college, one's still in high school, and I have this thought, maybe this itch of starting a business with them and working with them. And what I learned today is that a father and son can work together in a professional environment and partner on a business and have some tremendous success and have fun doing it. So you guys have been an example to me that can be done. And so I appreciated that. And I also appreciated your curiosity. You both come across to me as 2 very curious people. And I value that a lot. So, really appreciate that. And I've enjoyed our conversation.
That's awesome. And you're just goading me to make a smart ass comment that, Yes, Camden still gets sent to his room.
Oh,
Don't
okay.
that part still happens, right?
That's
Hey, Brett, how do folks find you, learn more about what you got going on and what Everee has going on?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Brett Barlow. Again, I'm the CEO of Everee. Our website has a lot of information. We're active on the social channels, but our website is everee.com, Everee. And, please reach out to us. And we'd be happy to talk to any of your listeners. And I personally, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can connect.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, we really appreciate your time today and sharing with us and giving us some insight on disrupting an existing flat line in industry and how you can make it perform better. So thanks for being here, Brett.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Camden, run us out.
all right. Thank y'all for listening to the Cam Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, Brett Barlow, for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to pass along to someone else so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow the Cam Otis Show on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch full videos of the show on our YouTube page. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button too. As always, the full archive of our episodes is available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.